I come home and I talk to you about it, and I express how I kind of went through that whole process, and I had awareness of like, oh, I wasn't communicating my needs, and I was placing your needs over my needs, and I was prioritizing what you needed over what I needed. And right now in my life, I'm trying to unpack codependency in such a way that I've never done before. And one of the things that I know from healing, from therapy, from just deep processing and inner work is I am very codependent and I have massive attachment issues. And so the way that I will be in relationship with you is by prioritizing your needs, wants, desires, your emotional safety, your physical, like I will just simply place all of my needs far, like not primary, secondary, far less over your needs. And over time, I've come to witness and realize how detrimental that is for both of us. So I've been trying to shift that up. And that dynamic of recognizing that, oh, here was another example where I subconsciously did that exact thing, where had I just said, 10 minutes into that conversation, hey, babe, this is getting really good. Like, this is a really good episode of the Steph Craig Show that I want to tune into, right? This conversation is getting really good, and I want to be present with you for it. And I'm not really able to be present with you because I have to leave. And I could have communicated that need to you in the moment, and you would have said, I totally understand. Everything's okay. We can pick this up later on. And instead of doing that, I did the opposite. And I was so mad because how slippery that is. Like, it just happens so subconsciously where I will not voice, express, even be aware of my needs because I'm so hyper-focused on what yours are. So we're talking about it after I get home, and I'm kind of processing it. And I suddenly came into this space of, I was communicating to you all of these things, and you were doing such a beautiful job of just like listening and hearing and being present with me. And I don't know if you remember this, I'm sure you did since it was just last night, but I couldn't even I was so kind of activated still when I got home that I couldn't even really communicate to you. It was like I was trying to go to bed and you had some other things you were trying to do, and you were like, I was coming off like I was angry with you because I was so twisted up in knots inside because I had been stewing about this and processing this and getting angry at myself for doing this toxic behavior that I'm trying to change and heal and all these kind of different things. And finally, it was just like you were kind enough to, whatever you had that you needed to take care of, you put on the back burner, and you just showed up in the moment and were there with me and allowed me to flesh all of this stuff out with you. And it became this really deep experience of me going in and looking at the dynamic of, because what happened was, it's so funny, babe, that we have these conversations in front of the podcast because we didn't plan this. I wasn't planning on talking about this. What happened was I communicated all of these things, and then I had a moment after communicating all of it where I recognized that I was really now wanting you to validate me and show me, validate is a good word for it, but I wanted you to validate me in that moment. And I recognized that the validation that I was looking for and that I was feeling the need for was, I wanted you to validate how hard of a life I had had. So then what you would be validating was not only how hard of a life that I have had, but how much of an improvement I've been making. So it was like twofold, where see me and validate me for how good of a job I'm doing, but not just in the present moment, but also fully acknowledging how much I've healed, evolved, changed up until that point. And that really caught me in the moment, and I had to really sit in it for a little bit. And what happened was I could feel this really difficult emotion in my body start trying to be felt and processed, but I couldn't. It's like every time I tried to go towards it and try to feel it and express it and communicate it, it would just like slip through my fingers. It would just hide. It would cover up. It would, dissolve into the fog and into the mist. And I couldn't connect to what it was to try to articulate it. And so then we just had this moment. I'm getting all uncomfortable now. Let me adjust and shift some things. Surely I need to fuck around with my microphone. Where I had this moment where I was able to just sit in that feeling and let it bubble up to the surface and articulate some like very few words and recognize that I was like really in this moment of embodying a really young version of me. I felt very small, probably, the same age I was playing that memory game, 3 or 4 years old, and seeing the dynamics of how I had a program and a story that I was given as a child that my needs weren't important and necessary, and the only way that they were deemed worthy of attention, or that I was deemed worthy of attention / love, was if it was a really terrible situation. Like it had to be a very severe thing before I got attention. And fast forward to as an adult, that's kind of the recognition I had, where it was like, I wanted you to validate me in the moment, but not just like, yeah, you're doing a good job of having this awareness, but I needed that validation to come through the lens of like, don't you see how hard it's been for me? And that was really hard to sit in. It was like twofold, where I was stuck in this little inner child version of me, like 4-year-old Craig, just full of emotion and pain, and being witnessed by you in those moments was really hard. But also I kept trying to come back to like present higher consciousness Craig as an adult, to put the pieces together and understand that coping mechanism as a child was developed because of X, Y, and Z, and this is how it's manifesting as an adult. And I just kept struggling in that space of coming from the inner child version back into the adult version. And eventually I just kind of gave up and just melted into this emotion. And the entire time you did this amazing job of just sitting with me and being with me and listening to me and holding space and processing this through with me. And there was a point where I needed to ask for help. Like I needed you to reflect back to me what you had heard me say, but reflect back to me through a lens that kind of, share some of your experience of this, babe, because now I'm getting incredibly uncomfortable. I mean, the reason I'm bringing this up and talking about it is because you're reminding me to breathe. Because it's a really good example of tell me more, and how practicing open and honest and vulnerable communication with each other leads to these kind of experiences where we're able to connect in this way. And I'm sure there's a part of this narrative that people have where like what that was for us, or that level of healing with each other, is probably something that shouldn't happen in a relationship. That's probably something that you should save for like a therapist or something like that. And I don't believe that. I believe that level of like connection and the ability for you to sit with me as I process some really deep inner child wounds, as well as have them like totally rise up the surface and bubble up and be felt and experienced. I mean, I think it was an incredibly beautiful experience that I'm grateful that you were there for, and that you were able to help me in. And it's not like this is the thing where it's, that's not your responsibility, blah, 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 all those narratives, all that story that people have around like, that's why you save that shit for your therapist. I disagree. I think that it's very beautiful that you and I have the ability to help each other in that way. And I'm really grateful that you were there with me to help me through that process. So now, I asked you earlier, right, share some of what you experienced from it and your thoughts around it.
First of all, you did a really good job last night. Like I could see that there was a lot of emotion coming up in you, and that what you were working through was big, that it had a lot more to do with the way that it was manifesting on the surface. It was easy to see that because you were doing such a good job at communicating your experience, and really, 'cause the way that you brought that to me, you weren't saying you did this, you made me feel like this, and I had to overcome and look at things because of like you were very much taking accountability for your actions, how you were feeling, what you were experiencing. And I know I'm saying you, so that might be intense, but the way that you were speaking was in I terms. This is how I was feeling. This is what I noticed. This is what it brought up for me. This is what I started to see that I need to shift and change in our dynamics. This is what I see. This is how I see I've been acting before. So there was a massive amount of accountability on your part where you were really sharing with me really openly about your experience. And like you did such a good job. It was really beautiful to watch you like go through this space because you did most of the work. You did have a moment where you asked, and as you mentioned that, and that was a really healthy thing to be able to do. I know that there is work that is for therapists. There is work, and like trauma dumping all over your partner is a thing that, maybe you don't want to do. There's all these different levels, but my personal belief is therapists are amazing. Therapists are amazing. Everybody, if you have the opportunity to have a therapist, like don't wait till your world's falling apart. If you have the opportunity, find one and talk some things out. They are amazing. We all need help, whether it's a therapist, a coach, however, like we all need help. And your inner child, your wounded parts are going to come up in your relationship. They are going to come up. You cannot wait until you are with your therapist, the 1 hour that you have, before your inner child surfaces, before your wounded part surfaces. You have to know how to like navigate that in a relationship with somebody because it's going to come up. It's going to come up, and having a partner that sees you in your space of where you're hurting and you're working through that, to say, take that away and go deal with that with your therapist would be really fucked up in my opinion. So I'm really grateful that you felt safe enough to go through that with me. And I'm also really lucky that I got to see you show me those parts of you. And sometimes things can get messy. I understand that. Sometimes I get it way wrong and I take things personal and I think it's about me and I get defensive. And sometimes, the same for you. We have these moments, but we practice. We practice what we talk about. We practice communicating with each other. We practice. And a lot of times we get it right. And even if it's not right 10 years from now, we get it right for where we are in that moment, and we're willing to keep learning and keep growing and keep getting it right at different levels. And so I was like, it was beautiful to watch you go through that. It was beautiful to be a part with you.
We were meant to be. We were meant to be.